Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. Continuing with the video series of SQL Server Agent, we are now going to look into what are called alerts. We're going to discuss briefly what are alerts. I'm going to show you and demonstrate to you how you can set up alerts severity from 17 through 25 using via a script. I'm also going to be mapping these severity script 17 through 25 using a script and mapping it to a newly created operator called DBA admin. And then I'm going to finish it off with showing an example of how to create an alert for one of the most common things that a DBA should be aware of is if the transaction log is getting full. And if it does, then obviously we want to be alerted of that via an email. So I'll show you, demonstrate that. So what are alerts? Well, as you can read here, alerts are generated by SQL Server and are entered in the application log. And when an SQL agent reads these application logs and compares the written events there to the alerts that we created or defined, then the SQL agent fires that, matches it first, and then fires an alert and sends an email. So that's the primary function, is to look into the log, see if there's anything comparable to the alert that we've set up, and if it does, then it'll file our email. So what are some of the types of alerts? Well, alerts are categorized from 001 right up to 25, if you will, from 1 to 25. And while the first 10, as you can see, the severity level is called severity level of the alerts, are informational. So we don't really want to be setting up, you can, but we don't want to set up any alerts for them. Same thing goes from severity level of alerts 11 through 16 that are generated by the users. Now, the ones where you want to be as a production database administrator, we want to be alerted for are the severity levels of 17 through 25, which indicate either a software or a hardware errors. And when a level 17, 18, 19 occurs, you can continue to work, but you should check the error log to set. Now, obviously, if the severity becomes even clearer than that, where the database is being affected, then you can run what's called a DBCC check, and I think I've briefly introduced you that to determine if the integrity of the database and to the extent damage. And obviously, if there is any damage with DBCC, then you'll have to restore it with the database. And we'll be, again, discussing that in more detail later. Here I've mentioned or given you an indication of what each level is defined by. So severity level 17 is primarily insufficient resources. So obviously you're going to get this alert fired if the following occurs, such as locks or disk space of the database you use is insufficient. You've got severity level 18, which is a non-fatal error detected. And while I'm not going to go through all these definitions, I'm certainly going to give them to you so you can read them. But the key thing to note is that if you do get any severity level from 17 or above, then you should certainly address it immediately and check it out. So you can look at the definitions here. I'm also going to show you, as I said, through how to set up the email, set up the alerts using these alerts. And these are obviously the 17. So this is the SQL script that you can copy paste, and I'll show you that in a second. Before we begin there, let me show you how to create an agent, SQL agent alert using a GUI. So let's go over to our SQL Server. And as you can see right here under SQL Server agent, you see the folder called alerts. If I refresh it, you can see that I do not have any alerts created. So the first thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to create a database called alerts. So I'm just going to highlight that and execute it and refresh it. And there's the alerts folder. So now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look into the log space that database is using. So if I go down here and I just executed DBCC SQL perf log space, which I've shown you before. So here's our database here, alert. As you can see, the log space used is almost 44%. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up an alert to say that if the transaction log utilizes at least 550% of this, then I want an alert fired automatically, and then it's sent to me via email that this transaction log is getting full to the threshold that I've defined. So that's what the alert is going to do. So I'm going to do that right now. So in order for me to do that, I'm going to go right click on alerts, go new alert, and I'm going to just call it T-log is getting full. And then also you have 3 types of alerts here that you can set up. You can set up a SQL Server event alert. You can set up, and obviously now if you look at that, you can base the alerts on various databases. You can, if you click here, you can see all databases. You can select the event of the alert for all databases or specific database. If you know the severity number, you can certainly put it here. And this is what I was talking about earlier about the severity of these alerts. The one we're going to be concerned with are from 17 onwards. These are considered obviously fatal and insufficient resources. These are the ones we want to be concerned about. Not to say that we don't want to address these, we should, but these are going to be showstoppers, if you will, so we need to address those. But for my purpose, for this demonstration, make sure it's enabled. I'm going to actually select the type being an SQL performance condition alert. And when you select that, you get an options of an object to select. And I'm going to select, obviously, as you can see, there's a tremendous amount you can select. I'm going to select databases. I'm going to select the counter. And the counter that I'm going to select is the log file used size KB. So I'm going to select that. Again, depending on the instance, I want to base my instance on alerts database. And what do I want to do? What is the threshold? The threshold is if the counter goes above, let's say, 500 kilobytes, then I want to get a response. I want to get an email. And then obviously go to response. And how do I want to be responded? We can execute a job or notify operator. In this case, I'm going to say notify operator. I'm going to say how. I'm going to say obviously through email. I'm going to go through options, and I'm also going to say include the alert error in the text. And as soon as I go OK, now I've created an alert. So if I double click it, you can see that. So this alert simply says, go to this database or look for this database. If you see the log file being utilized is greater than 500 kilobytes, then send an alert via an email to the operator that I've set up. So that's what the email is going to do, or the alert's going to do. Now that I've done that, so let's look at some activity. Let's go to my, see, as you can see, this is being promoted from the other previous ones that I just, so let me just delete all these. And now we have a deletion. So now we don't have any emails. So we're going to go to our database. And the first thing I want to do now is utilize that database, call alerts. I'm going to create a table called while table. And then I'm just going to import the data. And the way I'm going to import the data, as you can see right now, I don't have any email. And this hasn't been activated. So I'm just going to right click, tasks, import data or export data. And basically this is just emulating activity, obviously. And I'm going to select dot, which means local, go to alerts, go next, go next. And the database I'm going to select, because it has a lot of data in it, is the orders detail. I'm going to go next, next. Now, as soon as I run this, it's done. It starts running. There's activity going on. I want to go back to SQL. And it's finished. So obviously 125,000 rows have finished. If I now look at the log space utilized by that database, you'll notice that it's obviously grown from 1 megabyte to almost 2.5 megabytes, and 70% of it's used. So did it pass the 500 megabytes, kilobytes of threshold? And if it did, then I should have received an email. So let's look at our email, and there it is. So if I double click that, you'll notice it says the SQL performance counter log file used instance alert for object database is now above the threshold which I set, which was 500 kilobytes, and it's currently 8. So that way now we can monitor all these activities that are going on and look at the alerts. So this is how you set up an alert using a GUI. Now, going back here, so let me actually disable that. I'll keep getting it. So let me disable that. And this is how you disable it if you don't want to delete the alert. The other thing that I want to point out now, obviously, is if I refresh the alert, you'll notice I only have one alert, and that was the one I just manually created. As I mentioned, as a database production administrator, you want to be aware of alerts from 17 through 25. Now you can do it individually. You can go right click, new, severity, and you can go 17 and call it whatever you wish here and go OK. And you can response, you can notify, email, options, email, so on. You can do that individually from 17 through 25. However, it's a lot easier if you just execute this script that I'm going to give you. So the first thing I'm going to do is create alerts 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, simply put. And this script will be provided for you. And you don't really need to understand it, but it's basically just executing these sprots and providing the script to alert. So I'm just going to highlight this. Let me get 18. Obviously, make sure you use the MSD database and execute. And now if I go to alerts and refresh, there are the 17 alerts. Now if I double click on 17, you'll notice that it's automatically created for me. It's been defined against all databases, which I do want. It's a type SQL Server event alert, and obviously the severity is already selected for us. If I go to response, now obviously I have not mapped anything. That's why we're not seeing any email alert. Same thing with options here. It has got including the error, and that's fine. So now if I want to map this, meaning if I want to associate this with an operator, I can do that. And so I'm going to select this. Select the MSD database, and the first thing I want to do actually is I'm going to just quickly create a new operator rather than Raphael, the one I've created here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new one called database_map admin, which is this definition here. So if you want to actually create a lot of operators rather than using the GUI, this is how you can do it, and just change the database name and database email. But I'm just going to execute this using MSDB database, and now I've created a operator. So if I go here and refresh, and there you go. So now what I want to do now is I want to associate all those alerts that we just created, 17 through 25, to this newly formed operator. And again, I'm going to be providing you this. All it is just mapping that alert 17 to this database and so on. So I'm going to highlight this, go all the way down, and execute. And now if I double click on the operator, you'll notice that if I go to notifications, that indeed all those emails have been mapped to him, and emails have been set up for him to receive emails if there's a issue. So that's how easy it is to set up an operator, set up an emails, and set up an alert and map it to a specific operator. So now that gives you an introduction to what alerts are, what are their importance, and how important it is. And one of the most important ones that you will actually do, or I have certainly done, virtually every database has or should have, is this one. This is one of the most important ones we should have. But again, I've been stressing that one of the most important jobs of a database administrator is to be proactive, monitor your size growth, proper sizing, proper auto growth increments, configuration, so you can prevent this. But this is as a safety net, which we should certainly have nevertheless. So I think I'll leave it there. That'll give you an introduction to what alerts are. And the next video I'm going to be talking about in SQL Agent is defining and talking about what is master and target databases, how you can use SQL Server Agent to manage jobs on multiple servers and database administrations. So I'll leave it there, and my name is Raphael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator.